concept of how we were gonna go about the books. And using this book kind of holds me a little into, I don't want to go out of the book. But it has, it's very historical. And there's some information that yeah, it's a little iffy about that. Today we're gonna just review some of the, I think we're gonna do 3 chapters. I apologize that I wasn't here last Monday. I was not feeling well, and therefore I fell behind on my class. I was out Monday and Tuesday. But anyhow, we're going to go ahead and pray and start the class, okay? Heavenly Father, I thank you for this evening. I thank you for having the privilege to be in unity with my brothers, with my sisters, as one, to come and learn more of you. I know maybe this is not such a evangelical class for the meantime, but I ask you for you to open our minds, our hearts, to take what we can work using your name, and what is not for you, then we discard it. I thank you. I pray for my sister that you touch her lungs, that you touch her chest, that you heal her, Father, that you take away any allergies, any infection, anything that's obstructing the bronchial area. You, Father, heal her body. I ask of you to heal her, to touch her, to be able to rest in you, to find healing in you. In the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Okay, so I did a little script, if you call it that, for the class. Maybe you can make copies afterwards. I'll leave it here. I apologize, my printer no longer works. I wasn't even able to make my church's bulletin on the Saturday because it gave up on me. So I was unable to make more copies. Okay, so chapter 1. What we're going to go over is the introduction to the Colossians. I'm just going to read a little bit of what I thought were important. You can also share with me certain other things that brought your attention on chapter 1, and then we'll move forward, okay? The cities of the Lycus Valley. The first one, I think, is Colossia, the home of the church to which Paul's letter to the Colossians was addressed. Was the city in the Lycus Valley of Western Anatolia, which is Asia Minor. The last king of Pergamum, Angelus III, died without heirs in 133 BC and bequeathed his kingdom to the Roman state. When the Romans agreed to accept the legacy, they reconstituted the kingdom of Pergamum as the province of Asia. How powerful this reign of Romans. I mean, we could still see it today. What a powerful empire. Even though all of these years have passed, the Roman Empire still is very, very strong in our culture, in our society. And see how this king who didn't have children, well, they went ahead and gave it to the Roman state, and I believe that's how it is here. If you have properties and you don't have any heirs, I think the city takes over, or the government takes over, and it becomes part of the state, not nobody else's. So the cities of the Lycus Valley were thenceforth subject to the authority of the Roman proconsul of Asia. Apart from the 3 years following 88 BC, when the Romans were forced to abandon the province by Mithridates VI, king of Pontus, and the brief overrunning of the Anatolia by the Parthians in 40 BC. So here, it just makes me wonder, and I don't know if it was brought to your attention, what was the religion like since the Romans were the main empire?
They have the background is far from what exists already, because they got influence. This was a route, very trafficked route. That's the Assyrian empire was in those days very, very strong.
Yeah.
The Lycus Valley was already with a culture coming from the north, that's Macedonians and Greeks, already penetrated all the area. And to the south, the Persian, Medo-Persian, and all these cultures were into that particular.
Yeah, and it was kind of like all these different cultures and customs and beliefs were bundled up in one.
Yeah, I believe he's right. You're right. Even during that time, without the Catholic yet, they were pretty much universal already. Like they compromised. So
yeah, because they wanted to expand, and when we want to expand, what do? We compromise. Okay, well, you believe in your God of Son, but guess maybe we can turn this into, he is created by one God, and then we're not gonna idolize something, but we're gonna do it a different way, and we're still gonna do the offerings and cult for what you believe in, but now it's gonna be a little, like a bundle. The AT&T thinks that they just came up with it. It's been years that they're trying to bundle us into believing other things. So that was brought to my attention, and I was thinking, I wonder how difficult it was to evangelize in that time. If now it is difficult to evangelize, and so many people, it's not mainly the religion that they don't want to let go of. It's the tradition. They feel like they are betraying their roots, their culture, their mother and father, their grandmother, their country. And that is now, I'm sorry. That is now, I cannot imagine in this era that the empire was much stronger than it is now, that people were not so educated as we are now. How difficult it must have been to evangelize, to kind of talk about Christ and bring people to Christ in this era when the Romans were in charge, and I'm sure they had that you weren't able to express yourself freely as it is here. Well, in this country we can. There's other countries that we still have that we cannot express ourselves freely. So that was kind of what was in my head, how difficult it must be to be evangelizing in this era. By the beginning of the Christianity era, Kalaja had dwindled in importance and become one of the. So I guess here the book, I wrote it from the book, but to me, I want to elaborate a little because it kind of confused me. So Kalaja was like an uprising city. It was, becoming very important. But there were some people who say that Kalaja with some other small towns were not as important. I guess there was a dispute there of if it was an important city or not. And I bring it to, for example, like the capital of our state. Sometimes it's not as famous as other cities of our state, like Sacramento. But not everybody knows Sacramento, California, but a lot of people know Los Angeles, California, or Hollywood, California. Yeah, like Florida. The capital is Tallahassee. I was like, what? It should be Miami. It's all about Miami, Who says Florida? It's all about Miami, but I guess it's kind of like that even though it might not be so popular, it's still very, very important. Sacramento is the capital of our state. Tallahassee is very important in Florida. It is the capital of Florida. So here it says, and become one of the, so Kalaja becomes one of the several unimportant small towns, but the inference is invalid because of Lacuna and Strabo's text at this point. I guess this person quotes how important Kalaja is, how wealthy it is, how abundant this city is. The site of Kalaja was discovered by W.J. Hamilton in 1835. He identified its ruins and Acropolis south of the river and its necropolis on the north bank. It remained the religious center of the district after the population of Kalaja moved to Kanai, modern Honas. So, if people were still going to this city to unite or to have religious cults, it must have been really, really important. Like nowadays, we have Rome, right? Mm-hmm. Where the Pope was named, and I don't know, I saw maybe a second of the news in Spanish, and it was like all of these people in this city, and it's such a big deal for them, that now they have a pope, and even though all these years have passed, again, Rome is still very, very important. Religiously, why? Maybe for us because we're not from that religion, maybe because we've I don't want to, well, I'm not going to be very political, but we have opened our eyes and we have seen the truth in the Word, that we don't need to venerate or, we can access God through the blood of Christ. But even with all of that, Rome is still very important when it comes to this religious matter. And that's what happened here. Even though these people moved away, they were still having, it was a religious center of the district. 3 miles to the south, at the foot of Mount Cadmus, Honas Dag. And then Laodicea near modern Eskhisar, 5 miles northeast of Denizli, was founded by the Seleucid king Antiochus II and named in honor of his wife Laodice, plainly at some point between his ascending to the throne in 261 BC and his divorcing her 8 years later. So I guess the city was named after this emperor emperor's or king's wife,
Uh-huh.
to please her. Laodicea rapidly gained an importance to the point where it rivaled Colossia. Like Colossia, it retained its civic status under the Romans. So again, another small city started to become a very popular, very important city, and it was obviously under the Romans, the Empire of Rome. When the provincial system of the Roman Empire was recognized toward the end of the 4th century, Laodicea became the seat of government of the newly constituted province of Phrygia Passatina. Hierapolis self-evidently means the holy city. And to me, this is, they call this name a holy city, and when I think of holy city, all I can think about is Jerusalem. How different people, how different people think, and every day we learn something new. It may have originated as a settlement attached to the temple of the Great Mother. Again, the Roman Empire had their religious background, but they also incorporated other beliefs. When I read this, the Temple of the Great Mother, I assume, and maybe I'm wrong, but this is maybe where we get worshiping the Mother of God.
There's Sumerian background there.
Yeah.
Egyptian.
Yeah, and that we, and as time has passed, we no longer call it this, but we call it the Virgin Mary or Virgin Guadalupe, or everybody has a different name for this virgin. But if we would start to study where it came from, I'm pretty sure we would find more information on the Great Mother. It has been thought to have first received the status of a city, which is the word polis, from Eumenes II of Pergamum, 197 through 160 BC, but was more probably a Seleucid foundation going back to the time of Antiochus I, 281 through 261 BC. So it was very short in regards to the cities of Lycus Valley. I don't know if anybody has any comment in regards to the chapter 1 and the cities.
However, we wish to have biblical or historical maps. That's going to be a little better.
Yeah, I think there has to be a different way. I know that if we read the historically background, it helps us when we read the Bible. It'll set like a picture in our head, and it'll kind of be easier for us. I just don't know how to. I'm learning as I go how to combine the two, so we could relay it. So the second chapter is the Jewish settlement in the Lycus Valley. And here again we see the Jewish nation spread everywhere. Wherever you go, you'll find a Jew. Well, now it's all over the place.
All over the place.
Yeah, like before we didn't immigrate that much. So there was only a few of certain people that you would would see, or, for example, in Chile, I do not recall when I was little ever seeing a dark-skinned person. I don't know if you all have met my older daughter, she's dark-skinned. That's as dark as it would be over there. And because of people moving and immigrating, and people from Peru and Brazil, now you see colored people in Chile. So everybody is like going everywhere. I know in Spain there's a lot of people who are from Chile. I have my 2 cousins that live there. I have family that live in New Zealand. So they kind of go everywhere, wherever you go. Nowadays, you see other cultures, other people from different countries. I remember when I moved back to Florida, I was 8 years old. I was the only Hispanic family in the neighborhood. And we had, I remember all the kids were playing, and I remember we had a Chinese family. They were neighbors, and there were 2 little sisters, and the sisters started to speak in Chinese, and we were in the group, and one of the Caucasian girls tells me, "Anna, what are they saying?" And I started laughing, and I said, "I don't know what they're saying. They're not speaking in English or Spanish. I don't know. They're speaking in Chinese." And she was kind of like, "Oh, really?" And nowadays, we know, even just by looking, oh, look, he's from Mexico, oh, he's from Puerto Rico, oh, he's, we're getting so accustomed to different countries that we can tell the difference. But when I first, when I was in Florida, I was just like, what do you mean? What are they saying? My mom's friend, she was going to take her to Mexico for vacation because she asked my mom, "So Mary, do you speak Mexican?" And she was laughing, and my mom was looking at her, and she said, "Sharon, what do you mean I speak Mexican? They speak Spanish. That's what we speak." And she's like, "Oh, okay." So everywhere you'll find different people, and here we find some of the Jewish nation who has been spread. As we know, they were taken captives, and they had to immigrate to other places. So chapter 2, Jewish settlement in the Lycus Valley. Some Jewish settlement in Western Anatolia can be traced back to quite an early date. Apparently, there were Jewish exiles in the Lydian city of Sardis in the time of the prophet Obadiah. According to Josephus Seleucus I, says here 312 through 281 BC, founder of the Seleucid dynasty, granted Jews full civic rights in all cities which he founded. It is wise to consider carefully what Josephus and other Jewish writers mean when they mention the enjoyment of full civic rights by Jews in a Hellenistic city. I wonder how that was.
They allowed them to practice their religion because they were in a foreign country, but they gave them the freedom to practice their Jews.
I wonder how it was, because they were in a Hellenistic city, and to me, Hellenistic means idolatry.
Yeah, and Greek.
Right?
Greek.
Yeah, I picture like the statues of, whatever, and then here we have the Jews who are very conservative, who don't idolize, who stay in a small community, even nowadays. They're very close, and they're very jealous of their scripture. They don't want to teach it, to people. They don't want to They don't want to mix, and I wonder how that is in this city. But then I think, well, look at us. You know, we have neighbors that are not believers. We live in a world that most of the people are not believers. And we have to keep moving forward, and we have to be kind of different than everybody else. You know, we meet a lot of people that say, I don't believe in God, but yet they talk a lot about God. And they know a lot, but they don't believe in God. So that was kind of odd to me. I wonder how that worked, you know. That says here, Antiochus II is said to have planted Jewish colonies in the city of Ionia. And this also brings me back to, this is why our cultures have so many different, yet much alike. If we come to think about how we behave, how we dress, what the role of the man in the house and the role of the woman in the house, is sometimes very much alike in different cultures. Even though we might not come from the same background, maybe we don't speak the same native tongue, but if we see our families, it looks very much like we're all kind of the same.
I'm sorry, I can follow that these Jews were part of the first exiles in when they were exiled to the north and to the east, because some went to where was Syria. Took some people and they were scattered all over.
Yeah.
Because they were fleeing that part. And they took what they had, because they had the tradition, the laws. And those people that they're talking about, I think they are the lords of the kingdoms in that area, like this guy, the Seleucus. I think Seleucus was from the Persian background. This is in the year 281 before Christ.
Yeah, a lot of, you know, what we see here, for example,
They were living behind them.
yeah, and most of them were young. They would keep the young
Yeah.
so they could mix. And have you noticed that our youth is very easy to forget?
Yeah, where you can.
Like they wanna do with
They adapt easily to the new
Yes,
culture.
they do. For example, both of my parents, my father and my mother, are from Chile. The culture in Chile is very different than the culture here. They drink tea. You know, they have their tea time. They don't eat tortillas. They don't eat a lot of beans. The way they eat and everything is very different. I grew up, my mom tried to keep our culture or tradition with me. But my girls, if I don't buy tortillas, Michelle is like, hey mom, what's going on here? There are no tortillas, what am I supposed to eat? Bread? And in Chile we eat bread. And I'm like, no, I'll get some, you know, if we don't have beans once a week, my girls are like, hey, what's going on with the beans?
These are hiding.
Yeah, we don't have beans, we don't have tortilla, we don't have tapatio. I mean, come on, mom, what are we doing? What are we gonna eat? It's very easy for them to lose that because they were not brought up by my mother, and I just kind of went with the flow. I mean, my mother wasn't here with me, and I had to adapt.
Mhm.
My Spanish is very different than how it's spoken in my country, but I had to adapt to different words. Even though it's the same language, it's Spanish, I had to adapt my words. My husband is from Colombia.
Oh.
His Spanish is very different than mine, and I have to adapt to how he speaks so we can understand each other. Michelle went to vacation in Colombia, and she was so upset because she couldn't have a taco over there. So again, here we see that this empire kept the youth so they could be changed and lose what they had, and everybody else kind of all over the place. And I've noticed that when we come to the United States, people that are not born here or they come with their families, you have that detachment from the parents to the kids because it's different. You were brought up one way, and this country is different than how you were brought up. Sometimes the language barrier and all of these laws and different things, it's difficult. It's difficult to adapt when you're older than rather when you were younger. So here you have these Jews communities or colonies that were being sent to different cities. Let's see here. But Jewish settlement, settlement, Phrygia, on any substantial scale is to be dated late in the 3rd century BC, when Antiochus III, having recovered Phrygia and Lydia from the Pergamons and from his rebellious uncle Achaeus, ordered his satrap Suses to send 2,000 Jewish families with their property from Babylonia as a military settlers, and the garrisons and other vital spots of those 2 Anatolian regions. Houses and cultivable lands were to be provided for them. They were to be exempt from taxation for 10 years, and they should have the right to live under their own laws. So here, they were being spread. They were having houses, they were having a field where they can cultivate, and they could live under their own laws. And what I notice here is the rebellious uncle. Have you noticed that most of these empires or rulers, it's always kind of like the family member that wants to take over the reign, or they want to take over the government. But what we see here is, it's not envy, the word I'm looking for. It's a commandment that you should not desire.
Commit.
Codicia in Spanish.
Okay.
Okay. So here we see that people are so far away from what God teaches us that they don't care that that's the nephew, they don't care that that's their mother, their husband, their son. They want that power. And we see it through history. The political changes by which the Lycus Valley passed successfully under the rule of Pergamum and Rome made little difference to the Jews who resided there. The influence of the Jewish settlements on the folklore of Phrygia is well illustrated by the way in which the story of Noah was taken over at Apamea as a local cult legend. So they kind of took over all of these incidents or situations so much the written Torah, but their verbal Torah. When they teach their children, or when they teach amongst each other the commandments, or when they talk about Noah's Ark, or when they talk about Moses giving the tablets, all of that, it wasn't written at the beginning. Before Moses' time, nothing was written, everything was verbal. And other people, other cultures listened to that, and they kind of took over that. And sometimes it happens nowadays too. They just change here and there the names or whatnot, but we kind of adopt certain legends or stories.
Like for example, the golden rule of the Lord Jesus Christ, already copied by Confucian, right? The golden rule of Confucian is just a little reverted.
Yeah. Yeah, it's people, they like what they hear, and then they'll change it here and there, and maybe adopt it to what their beliefs are, or what they how they want to manipulate the situation sometimes as well. So it could seem that they were also part of this incident or this situation. So I'm going to read a little bit of the Christianity in the Lycus Valley. It's very, very short. We'll continue in the next class this chapter, which is chapter 3. The inclusion of Phrygia among the places from which Jewish pilgrims came to Jerusalem for the feast of Pentecost following the death and resurrection of Jesus. And we can find that in Acts 2:10. May be designed to prepare the reader for the eventual evangelization of that region. Whether that is or not, Phrygia was evangelized within a quarter of a century from that time. The Lycus Valley was not evangelized by Paul himself. It is plain from Colossians 2:1 that he was not personally acquainted with the churches there. It is possible that when Paul journeyed overland from the east to Ephesus to take up his ministry there in AD 52, he went by the Lycus Valley. When Luke says that he arrived in Ephesus after passing through the upper parts, it may be that Lycus route that is indicated. So here we're going to start, or they say what we already know, that Paul, he himself, was not the one who literally took these people and became or made them a church, a congregation. But maybe he wasn't, or yes, he wasn't there physically, but in some point he did speak to somebody who he influenced so much that individual was able to evangelize and start a congregation. And to me, that's really important for us as believers, because sometimes, at work, we can talk about Christ and maybe not just talk, but behave different than our co-workers. But yet, out of all of these co-workers, you only get one person to listen to you. And they'll look for you, and they'll say, hey, could you pray for me? Or what are you doing for lunch? Do you have a Bible? Maybe we could do something in the Bible. I was telling my husband yesterday that I have a coworker who sits next to me, and she's a believer, and she's been struggling, but she's going back to church. She's congregating. She lives in the Culver City, and one day she looks at me and she says, I don't believe that I have to give my tidings to church, because I can't even make it without giving my 10%. So I said to her, so if you don't make it without giving it, why not give it, if it's not going to make a difference? And she kind of just looked at me, she's like, oh Anna, it's just the pastor and you talking. And I said, no, why don't you try it out? You know, I said, 1 Samuel, God says that obedience is more, the fragrance is much better than any holocaust that we could offer him. And if you obey him, he will also be faithful to you if you're faithful to him. I said, why don't you just try it out? Nothing's gonna, I said, but don't give it with thinking, okay, God, I'm gonna give you, but you better, I said, just let it go, let it go. So it's been 2 Sundays that she's been giving her tidings. And I tell Edward, it's funny, I work with like 10 people just in the front desk. I'm not talking about the back desk. And I only have one person who's gone back to church, not even to us, you know, not even to like, hey, come to my church, but has gone back to church, who is giving her, offering her tidings, and we should never lose that hope. Maybe that one person can bring, you know, 10, 20, 30 people to the feet of Christ. And Paul, he didn't even know that this person was going to open this congregation, that he was going to be sending letters to them and exhorting them and teaching them by letters. And to me, that's very, very amazing that we can learn from it, that we could really, really, okay, it's okay, so we're only going to teach for one person, okay, so we'll teach that one person, because we don't know what that one person can do. And here in this book is telling us, you know, Paul had nothing to do with the evangelization of these people, but yet he did, because he had spoken to that individual who went and evangelized. Amen? So we're going to continue on chapter 3 next Monday. We're going to need copies.
We have more here.
Okay. Because next Monday I want to finish,
Everything?
yeah. So we could, and then I'll bring Monday also the questionnaire for the midterm. And we'll start with the other